Have you tried printing with translucent materials and, despite the name, been left a bit disappointed by the lack of transparency of the prints? Then don't worry, as there are a few settings you can change to vastly improve this. And in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly which settings you need to change in your slicer. And if you're new here, hi there, I'm Matt, and on this channel I'll be showing you lots of tips and tutorials for improving your 3D printing knowledge and experience. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So once you're in your slicer, as usual, I'm using Bamboo Studio. On my build plate here, I've just got a little test square, which I'm going to use to compare different settings to see different transparencies. So in this case, I'm going to be using Bamboo PLA Translucent. However, everything I talk about today will also apply to PETG Translucent. In general, PETG results in more transparent prints, whereas PLA results in more like a frosted look. It's personal preference, whichever you prefer. If you don't like working with PETG, then use PLA. So as with a lot of things, it seems the key to improving your results is to print hotter and slower. There are some additional settings that need to be changed with translucent materials to help with transparency. We're going to head to the filament settings, so under Project Filament and Edit. So the first thing we're going to change is the flow ratio. It's recommended to increase this to around 1.01. Basically, increasing the flow ratio can reduce the chances of getting under extrusion, and under extrusion can hinder the transparency of the material. So it's recommended to increase it slightly. The next thing you want to do is change the nozzle temperature. So for PLA, the default is 220. You want to increase this to 230 for all layers. And if you're using PETG, you'd want to change this to 270 instead. Another key thing for increasing the transparency is to adjust the cooling, specifically the fan cooling. In this case, we want to turn off the part fan and auxiliary fan completely. So under the cooling section, the min fan speed threshold and the max fan threshold, we'll just set these to 0%. And additionally, the auxiliary part fan, we want to turn that off as well. This is so the material can cool naturally, which will massively improve the transparency. One issue that can arise from this, though, is the increased likelihood of warping, especially with PLA, so just be wary of that. Make sure your build plate is nice and clean to ensure good adhesion. In terms of filament settings, that's all you need to change for PLA or PETG, so you can either save this or just quit out of that. The next settings you want to change are the line widths. Typically, you can increase it to at least 0.5, however you can go higher if you want, especially if you're using a larger size nozzle. I'm just going to change them all to 0.5. I'm not actually going to be using supports, but just change them anyway. On the topic of nozzles, you might want to use a larger size nozzle. This is because you can increase the layer height and larger layers result in a more transparent material. However, in my case, I'm using the standard 0.4mm nozzle, so I'm going to stick with a 0.2mm layer height. Next, in the Strength tab, we're going to decrease the number of wall loops to 1. I'm also going to set the top shell layers and bottom shell layers to 0. Essentially, we're going to have completely solid internal infill with only one wall loop to limit. And we're going to combine that with the aligned rectilinear sparse infill pattern. And we're also going to set it to 100% infill density. Depending on the size of your model, this can increase the filament usage and print time quite a lot, so just bear that in mind. And finally, in the Strength tab, we're going to change the infill direction from 45 degrees to 0 degrees. Lastly, we need to slow the print right down, so we need to head to the Speed tab. Not only will the lower speeds help with the transparency of the material, we also need it because we turned all the cooling fans off, so we need appropriate time for the part to cool naturally on the build plate. Otherwise your print will get messed up and ugly. Anyway, it's recommended to change all the speeds to 20 millimeters per second. I'm just going to quickly change everything that's above 20 to 20. I don't think you need to mess around with the accelerations, however you can if you want to. So those are all the settings it's recommended to change. So let's slice this plate and see what the damage is in terms of print time. So this little test piece is going to take 40 minutes to print, which is pretty crazy for something so small. I will also be printing a version using default settings to compare the transparency between them, and also to compare the total print time. Let's take a look at that now, actually. So after putting the settings back to default, and now if we slice this, so this version will only take just under 13 minutes. So using all the recommended settings is essentially triple the print time, which could be a deal breaker for you. But yeah, again, another thing worth bearing in mind. So we'll get these two printed and then I'll show you a comparison between them. So here's the result with the default settings. Don't know how well you can see it, but it's not particularly transparent. Then here's the version with all the settings I applied in the video. Obviously it takes much longer to print, but it does look much better. As a reminder, this is PLA translucent. I put them next to each other. You can see that the one on the right is a lot more frosted and opaque, whereas one on the left is quite a lot clearer as a demonstration. I mean, you can see through both, but yes, the one on the left is much clearer. especially at different angles. Obviously, if using PETG, you'll get even better results. Lastly, I wanted to check the effect that ironing has on the transparency of these materials. So firstly, I printed an ironing calibration card. I've shown one of these before in a previous video. For the purpose of this test, it doesn't matter if it's like perfect ironing settings, just so that it's like okay. But I did go with 4010 as the ironing flow and speed. So I'll apply those settings to this test piece here. So scroll down to find ironing. So interestingly, the all solid layer ironing feature could be most applicable here. So selecting the all solid layer, and I'm going to change the ironing speed to 40. And let's slice the plate. So now this little test piece is going to take 1 hour 30 to print, which is insane. This is over 1 hour longer than the standard settings and triple the print time of the transparent settings. So even if it comes out super transparent, I don't think this increased print time is worth it. But hey, it's worth testing out for science, right? And here's the version with the all solid layer ironing on, which I don't know if you can tell, hasn't come out more transparent than the other one. So I don't think this one's worth the triple print time and experiment fail, I guess. I'd say it's at best equally as transparent, but there are some defects in the internal parts, probably from excessive ironing. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend. Hopefully now you're well equipped to make some awesome looking transparent models. If you learned something new today, drop a like and a comment on this video. Also let me know if there are any specific videos you'd like to see in the future. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of my new videos. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.